All right, good afternoon, everybody. We have one brief hour to spend together. So thank you for being here. I do want to make you aware that this session is going to be recorded. So be careful of your comments or be bold in your comments, one or the other. So either one is all good. So thank you today for being our youth and community engagement best practices. My name is Jonni Fenner. I'm an assistant chief with the California Highway Patrol, and I have over 29 years on, and I am very, very honored and blessed to be a part of the panel today, but as a moderator. So today on our panel, we have Mr. Mark Logan. If you would raise your hand so they might know who you are, who has over a 37-year career within the security and criminal justice profession. And when he begins to speak, I'll allow him to share some of his accolades and accomplishments, but they are well defined on the app as well as the program. And he is highly decorated in a lot of different areas, and we're very privileged to have him here today. We also have Chief Mitchell Davis of the Hazel Crest Police Department with over 26 years in law enforcement, who's with us here today as well, and he can highlight some of the things from his career. We have Chief Eric Jones from Stockton, California Police Department with well over 25 years of experience. And we have Ms. Rhonda Glover, Special Agent of the FBI and the Chair of the Noble Youth Committee. And she has over 33 years in law enforcement. So collectively, you guys have an opportunity to hear from some individuals with over 100 years in the law enforcement profession. And I think that's important when you think about that and the legacy they've left in their own agencies and what they can provide for you here today. So the workshop or the session today is going to talk about our role in law enforcement and engaging with a broad range of youth and community. And I know this conference has had several sessions that have either been titled something along the lines of community engagement or having the title of youth and what that looks like. So what we're trying to do with our panel is to touch on a few things that these practitioners, these law enforcement professionals are actually doing that you'll be able to have some takeaways. We want you to have something that's tangible and takeaway for you today and take back into your agency. And so as we're moving forward on this, our title is engagement. And so we have to ask ourselves, what truly is engagement for you and your particular agency, and what does that look like? And so with that thought, I kind of Googled around on what an explanation of that might be. And when we're talking about our young people, which is our next generation that we truly need to find a way to tap into, it's about being involved in responsible, challenging actions to create positive social change. So we don't want to have engagement just on one level where we want to create conversation. We want it to be something that we infuse and enrich in the lives of our community and our youth so that they can go on and have positive social change in what we consider increasing the quality of all of our community members and Americans in the country and internationally. And so when we look at that, we look at youth-adult partnerships, and we want them to be structured to create an environment that both groups contribute, teach, and learn from one another. So you're going to hear some of the strategies that are here that are called listening sessions, but really what it takes to have a listening session, how you have to break ground and barriers before you can build trust. And so I don't know how many of you had the opportunity to sit in for the opening ceremonies for Simon Sinek. And he spoke about the area of building this trust. And as I was listening to him, I was thinking how he highlighted the importance of creating an environment where it's safe to make mistakes, but also where those around you can fully be themselves. And in that conversation, it was an inward focus to working with people in our work environment, but how powerful that is if we take that and we place it in an outward focus when we're interacting with the community. His message was equally important about this collective accountability, where as law enforcement agencies, we acknowledge our share of the accountability in the narrative. And so with that, we're going to talk about a few actual events and things that they've done, as well as those tangible things. And so for me, and one thing that I just wanted to share before I turn it over to our first speaker was I had an opportunity as a member of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. I am a president in our Central Valley, California chapter, relatively new president, and I had an opportunity to sit in a Law in Your Community presentation in one of our high schools in the Stockton community, which Eric polices, in a very socioeconomic depressed community, and listened to a conversation between football players, 55 of them, predominantly African-American, Hispanic male, and share with the two officers that were there. One of those was Officer Jesse Smith. And the young man, Hispanic man, shared a brief story about how he felt, and he was angry. And he was like, you know, my father was involved in this collision, and we were hurt, and the police arrived, and they immediately started asking my dad about these questions about how much have you been drinking, and, you know, where were you coming from, you know, and it was the tone and the things that he was asking him. And this young man is watching this. He's a teenager watching this. And when they even discovered at the point that he was not intoxicated, he was not at fault for the collision, they still didn't treat him any differently. And so here's this young man sharing this frustration and this anger about how he sat and watched his father being treated by his law enforcement department. And Officer Smith, before anything, his whole body changed. He's in uniform. He came closer to the young man, and he said, I'm sorry for how you and your father were treated. That should have never happened. And he stayed in that lane, and he didn't get defensive, and it changed the whole dynamic of the dialogue for the rest of those other 54 students that also had coaches in there, also had the commitment of the principal involved in that room, and came out with some solutions on some things that they could do moving forward that I don't think the department even thought of, because we think of ideas that might be good, but this is us on the outside versus what the young people really would like to see us do to engage and earn their trust. So with that, I want you to have an open lens as we move forward and move to our next speakers. If we have any time, we'll do a Q&A, but if not, please stay after and feel free to ask those questions. So with that, I'd like to ask Mr. Mark Logan to start us off.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I would have kept my seat, but I was advised that I had to come up here and stand and provide these comments. And you say, okay, all right. No, I'm Mark Logan. I was assistant director with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives for 27 years. Prior to that, a Detroit police officer. I sit on the Education and Training Committee for IACP, and I'm the chair of the Education and Training Committee for Noble in moving forward with this program we call The Law in You, Your Community, rather. The Law in Your Community started out as a program, The Law in You. It was based on engaging between police and our young people as it relates to building relationships, building trust. It was more on what was referred to as engagement with the youth and allowing them to develop a better understanding of processes, criminal justice, police procedure processes. You know, throughout the conference this week, we talked a lot about procedural justice, okay, and fair treatment, respect, understanding, getting to understand really processes that we go through. You know, understanding, allowing the young people to understand the processes of enforcement actions such as vehicle stops, pedestrian stops. You know, why do we go through these motions? Why do we behave in this manner? You know, we will stop you at a traffic stop, and we got an officer on one side and an officer on the other side, and what we're doing and why we're doing it. Basics for building a better understanding of what's going on. And then, they made comments in reference to procedural justice. They talk about fairness in process, displaying transparency in police actions, providing the opportunity to be heard regarding decisions made, providing our young people the opportunity to be heard as far as what are they going through, okay, providing the police officers to be able to provide understanding of what they're feeling as they're going through police enforcement actions. They're all coming together. And this program started out with the law in your community. We started out in Ferguson, right after the incident there, and we started it in a church. And it turned out very well because we were giving people the opportunity to express their thoughts, okay, on both sides, looking to gain understanding. Now, these conversations tend to get intense, okay, because it's filled with a lot of emotion, but that's okay. We're human. We're going to express emotion, and we as professionals do understand that. We're people too. So that's how the program got started. And we started doing it in, like 90-minute presentations. It's just that flexible where we'll do them in schools, community centers, we'll do it as a part of a youth program, or we've expanded it where, it's been adopted in certain public school systems so that it's part of a curriculum as far as building this understanding. And so we have to step out in being the leaders that we are and working with the community, having very thick skin because there are a lot of issues that we may not even be aware of, and you get into one of these sessions and folks are firing off things of personal experience. Now, it's gauged for youth between 13 and 18, okay? But like it was said in another session, we all at one time were 13 to 18 years old. So we do have a lot of adults there, and they are involved in the engagement. This program involves scenario-type activities where we will do a mock car stop and other things in the show, not only just standing up talking with you or going back and forth, but actually show the audience, what the dynamics are in these processes so as to get a better understanding. And that's what it's all about, getting a better understanding of the processes. Now, in these presentations, you're going to see some of the actual work that's being done in getting a better understanding and building a better relationship between law enforcement and the community. And that's what it's a continuous thing it would be, building a better relationship, displaying procedural justice and understanding processes so we can be more comfortable, so we can not have a divide in one group feeling comfortable when stopped by the police and another not, because we're getting to learn the unknown, okay? And that's what creates the fear, not knowing what's going to happen, okay? And expecting things that you might have heard about, whether they're true or not, okay? So that's what we do with the law in your community, looking to explain and share processes and build an understanding as far as how I feel versus how I feel, and let's come together and work this out so that we can build trust. So we've done this with a lot of different organizations, Boys and Girls Clubs, Jack and Jill Centers. We've done it with the NAACP churches. This year, we've done close to 100, maybe 5,500 people that have been involved so far, and it's continuing, and we're looking for additional partners, okay? And to be able to move this forward, we are accepting requests to be able to put this program on. The program involves somebody that's been trained through Noble, okay, in the Law in Your Community program. We will come out to the venue that you have identified, but we will not come out there without the local police representation being there with us. It's not that we just pop in and pop out. No, we have to be inclusive. So since we've been doing the program, it's been embraced by local law enforcement in that area. They come in and then they can answer questions that we may not be able to. That may be applicable to that particular jurisdiction. Okay, so it's a continuous partnership, and we want to continue to move this forward. Now, we're going to have more specifics brought to you, okay? And then at the end, I will share with you if those that are interested in learning more about this, because it is also a partnership with the COPS program with DOJ. I will be able to give you the contact information on where you can get additional information from the COPS program, as well as if you would like to request having this program within your community. So I really thank you for this opportunity.
As he said, he will provide some information. And I also have some resources that after our next speaker, I'll provide to you. But because we're on a time space, I want to make sure that we get everybody up. So, Chief, if you don't mind.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mitchell Davis. I'm police chief of a town called Hazelcrest. It's right outside the south side of Chicago. I am on the National Executive Board for NOBLE, National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. For the IACP, I am on the Juvenile Justice and Child Protection Committee and just involved in a lot of stuff. And but it's near and dear to me working with the community, especially young people. I was asked today to just kind of share some of the things that we're doing in the Chicago area as it pertains to the law in your community. We are all over the place. We have a very unique situation there in that we have Chicago, which has all the resources in the world to get things done, and then we have departments such as mine, which are the norm. We don't, you know, the Chicago Police Department has a group of Chicago police officers that are assessed their full-time job to go into the schools and teach these programs. And the Chicago public school system actually had us tailor our program to make sure that it met the requirements for their educational requirements within the school. So they go in 10 or 12-week sessions, just like DARE used to do, or DARE still does. They go in 10 or 12-week sessions, they spend 50 minutes in the classroom, and they go through the curriculum. Now, once again, most of us don't have the manpower to staff and do those things. So we do, as Mr. Logan just mentioned, smaller sessions. And I'm going to start off by showing a quick video clip of a school we went into, and this school is a very diverse school. You got kids that are wealthy there. You got kids that are on Section 8 there, and culturally it's different, socioeconomically it's different. But this school has a lot of resources, and what they did was the school itself made a video about the program that we actually came there and did. So.
We're actually presenting a program that's been developed by
it's not showing, is it?
Called NOBLE.
Oh, there we go.
The National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. And the program is called The Law in Your Community. The Law in Your Community is a law initiative where law enforcement actually educates young people on how to deal with the police, what the law is, what your rights are as a citizen, and it just covers the whole gamut of the law and you and your community.
Well, there are police officers here to help us to, when we get pulled over, how should we react to things and like, what all should we do and not panic and everything. So they try to like give us a video to show us demonstrations of everything we should do.
We do scenarios, we show videos, and having done these things in advance, we hope that if they encounter things like this, that they'll have a great outcome.
One of the things that Dr. Mansfield definitely wants for us to make sure that we are mobile here at the school. This is one of his initiatives, so this is definitely something that is school-wide. This is something that we want to make sure that all of our students, our future students, have this information.
I mean, everybody is aware of things that happen in the news, people who are stopped and then unfortunately lose their lives, you know, for something that may escalate. So we don't want that to happen to anyone in our community.
Because of what's happening in the world right now with like being pulled over and like the gun violence and everything with police officers, so I think it's a good thing that we have this thing.
you obviously don't want to like get like ticketed or like get arrested or do something stupid in front of a police officer, because you know, with all the stuff that's happening in the news, you don't want that to be you.
So the school itself actually produced that video, and they show it during their announcements during the day, and we actually were able to get a copy of that and reuse it. But the best thing that I like about it is when they actually speak to the young people afterwards, and the young people are saying some of the things that we're looking to actually do. Now, I want to make it clear that just because Noble presents this program, it's not just for black folks. It's not just for black folks to be taught the program or to present the program, because we do it in a lot of different venues, but sometimes people actually get that perception, well, you know what, this is not geared towards everybody. And that was actually brought to my attention during that presentation. We did about 1,100 kids that day. We had them in an assembly format, and during one of the first presentations, one of the administrators came to me and said, hey, I got some Caucasian faculty that's thinking that this is not meant for white people, it's just for black people. So before we got done with the session, I asked the audience, I said, how many people in here thinks that what we just taught today, how many people think that it pertains to anybody, no matter what your race is, no matter what your socioeconomic level is? And all the kids raised their hands. So we got adults that, you know, we got to work on mindset sometime, because the kids received it how it was brought. But once again, you got to know your audience. You got to make sure that you're talking specifically to them. So I was asked about some specifics and how you can actually get this up and going. And you heard Mark talk about some things, and you're going to hear about some other great things that people are doing. But we utilize this. I've done it for citizens police academies. I've done it in churches for their mentoring programs. You know, my biggest thing, and on the panel I sat on yesterday, one of the chiefs was mentioning, she said, you know what, it's not so much important to educate, but to communicate. And that's so very important. You'll hear it coming in various forms, but we have to have the courage as law enforcement officers. If we're going to bridge this gap, we've got to have the courage to go out and have the tough discussions that you heard about. The tough discussions that most of our people don't want to hear about. We don't want to hear people talk about their bad experiences. But as they say, and it's once again another cliche, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And when we're willing to take ownership on things that, hey, there are people in every profession. There's people out there that are doing things that they're not supposed to do. And we have to own up for that and take responsibility. And as leaders in law enforcement, being chiefs in law enforcement, it really falls on our shoulders to make sure that we are policing ourselves and doing everything that we can. So I'm not going to hog the time up here, be respectful to everybody else. But in closing, I'll just share that from a training perspective, one thing that we did, people ask, how do you get this out there? How do you let people know about it? Another chief and I actually went to a conference of grade school superintendents, junior high and high school superintendents. There's about 5,000 people there, and they had breakout sessions. And we did breakout sessions just giving a synopsis on what this was about. And when people heard what we were doing, the sessions were packed. And what happened is you got all these hundreds of schools now that are hearing about the program. But we obviously can't go to all these schools. So the one thing that we require in the Chicagoland area is, while we want to make sure that the local law enforcement agency is engaged, we provide training for everybody. We just insisted if we're coming to your community to present this program, your police department has got to give us somebody to make sure that they're trained so it doesn't fall on our back, because it's free. Everything is free. We come out and do everything for free. It doesn't cost the school anything. It doesn't cost the organization anything. We have grant money that helps us to do that, and I'm sure they'll talk about that later. But it's a tremendous program, and it's an opportunity for us to actually move forward and bridge that gap. So I'm going to do an AV switch real quick, before I sit down.
So before I bring Chief Jones up, just real quickly, I wanted to share with you just a couple of resources in between. So this is where you need to pull out your pen and use your paper or your digital device to take a note if you are interested, almost like you're in school. But I wanted to encourage you to make sure that you look at iacpyouth.org. If you look on there, you'll find different types of youth and engagement. And if you go down into resources, they have a youth-focused policing website that has online resource center. It is absolutely fantastic. I actually looked on it before I would put that out to you. Also, youth.gov has evidence-based and innovative programs, provides some good areas of discussion to begin bridging those conversations, as has been mentioned. And some of those include our homelessness in youth. As you know, we have over 500,000 to 2.8 million homeless youth. Literacy talks about children of incarcerated parents. We know that discussion can be very difficult and very different. And then also workforce development are some of the things that are included on that youth.gov. Also, notinourtown.org is another great resource. It's a collaborative initiative with US DOJ and the COPS office. It has tools and resources, which include some wonderful videos for great dialogue, where this is inclusive of all communities and different youth, where you might be able to utilize that to be effective. And then the last one is also US DOJ Community Relations Services, and that's justice.gov/CRS. And so I provide those to you because those are actual tools and resources that you can go to and try to use to be effective back in your agencies. And when we close up today, if we don't have time, please come forward and I'll go back over them again. But for some of you who seem to sift out a little bit before the presentation is over, I wanted to at least leave you with some resources. So with that, Chief Jones.
Thank you, Jonni, and thank you for your presentation so far, gentlemen. And I'm glad you pointed out that the law in your community, that program, that curriculum, that it is not designed specifically for Black or African American communities. It's for all of our communities. On that same note, Noble, you do not have to be Black to be part of Noble. Okay, I want to make that clear too. I am a member. I so believe in Noble and the work they've been doing, especially when it comes down to the tensions between law enforcement and the community and what they've done to take that issue on. In fact, I was sold when I sat through one of these very sessions that he mentioned, because here's what we'd been doing prior to that in our community in Stockton, California. It's near Sacramento. High crime rate, a lot of police community tensions, a lot of socioeconomic issues. And we had been doing a lot of law enforcement driven, presentations, especially to youth or to other folks, but we were sort of talking at everybody, okay? And then also there was a series of other sessions going on that a lot of our civil rights advocates and other groups were putting on that was, in my opinion, sort of a strictly know your rights presentation, which I felt could be a little bit imbalanced. And to me, the perfect balance that I saw for any of our communities, especially youth, was the law in your community, because it was balanced with know your rights and your responsibilities. And to me, that was what we had been missing in our community. And so I'll talk in a moment how the law in your community folds into this, what we call a four-layered approach to listening in a new way. Because this whole, hey, let's hear from our community, let's engage in our community, okay, that's a tough one. There's no easy answer. This curriculum certainly is a major breakthrough to me, component in it. But it's very difficult because all of our communities are different, and there was mention that it can be a little bit tailored, and you're going to want representation from your agency to be there, which is critical. But it's a big one to take on. We've seen tensions continue to rise. And what I've found, no matter what venue you choose to use, the folks from your community that you bring to the table, whatever it is you're doing, really, we all want two things. There's so much more common ground than we even think. And if we all want two things, which are a safer community and to reduce the amount of negative encounters by law enforcement with our community members, then why can't we have really meaningful dialogue and make some progress? And this is my opinion. If you have groups or individuals who don't want those two things, then they don't deserve a seat at the table, because they can submarine or torpedo your efforts. In fact, we had a lot of town hall meetings. You probably have town hall meetings in your jurisdictions, and you're going to continue to do town hall meetings, and so will I. Does much come out of that as far as tangible change? No. Some, people get heard, right, and that's important. But nothing really comes out of a town hall meetings, even though they're still necessary. So that's why we began to really move into what we call a 4-layer approach. Because here's one thing we experienced, and you may not have, but we experienced this. A lot of our town hall meetings or large group meetings were actually being hijacked by a handful of people, a small group, that did not want one of those two things I mentioned. They did not want to work with police. It was very evident. But they were very vocal. Often they're the same group that may show up at your council meetings. You still have to reach out to them, but there's a certain point where you have to continue to work with those who want to work with you. So we knew town halls weren't enough because we were hearing from our community members, hey, our voice isn't being heard. And these are from very critical individuals and groups, people who have a high level of scrutiny on police, but felt like they were being drowned out by those other voices. We definitely heard from our youth that they're not being heard because we often have a lot of community meetings, we have a lot of convenings, and oftentimes we leave out the voice of the youth. Another really big advantage of using the curriculum of the Law in Your Community. So the 4 layers are like this, and you're not going to be able to see it very well, but I think you'll have access to this. So I don't expect you to be able to read the text, but I just want you to see the flow of this, because this is where the Law in Your Community fit into what we call listening sessions. So the 4 layers are, the top left are your public forums. Okay, these are the town halls, the big public forums. Nothing really branches off from there because the real hard work doesn't really come from those, but they're still up there because you still have to do them. The next are those what we call neighborhood-based meetings. Okay, so maybe we don't advertise it through the whole city and Facebook or social media, but we will advertise it within that neighborhood. And we're out there either for a very acute problem within that neighborhood or maybe a particular incident that occurred. So it's issue or area driven, and these can be also things like your coffee with the police. Okay, coffee with the police are great. That alone is not going to fix your police community tension issue. We know that. But it's an important thing because it puts officers and community members in a casual relationship and where they can have some interaction kind of on one-on-one. These are also your neighborhood watch group meetings, your engagements watch, your engagement groups. And then if we move over to these study circles and sessions, this is where you see some arrows start to flow out from there. We found this is where the real change happens. Smaller sessions, maybe it's not open to the public, okay? Maybe it's for a particular organization. And from there, we've got our community advisory board meetings, okay? So we have those. We also we worked with the National Initiative on Building Community Trust and Justice to have reconciliation listening sessions. I'll come back to that. And then we have a partner, and you'll see it's Noble/SPD. It's a partnership with Noble, where we have the Law in Your Community sessions. And having our officers involved in that dialogue has been just immensely impactful. And that's typically for smaller forums or smaller groups, a lot in the schools, but sometimes we'll have large assemblies too, and where we can really reach more individuals. Then from there, though, what we've been doing is we've been capturing the narrative from all these different types of listening sessions, because I do want to hear from my community. And I'll tell you, when I'm personally doing a listening session, I have to do something that's a little different than I've been accustomed to, because kind of going to a lot of community meetings, oftentimes, here's what I would do, or I'd see some of our officers would do, is an issue would come up. Say we're at a community meeting and someone pops up and they have some issue. Actually, it's human nature to be a little bit defensive and to respond back immediately. Want to give an explanation immediately without fully hearing what is being said to us. I open up the meeting and don't say anything until the very end. Okay, so we're listening in a new way. We're hearing truly what it is they're seeing, feeling. That popped forward somehow. That was weird. Okay. But I open up, and this is where I saw a big breakthrough in my community and the feedback I received. The 2 breakthroughs that really got into that meaningful dialogue were 2 things. One was me personally at some of the listening sessions actually making some acknowledgments of past harms in our communities of color. So that's something we call, I'm not doing that, someone's got a remote, but that's okay. So it's actually what we call reconciliation work. So I encourage you also to go to the National Initiative on Building Community Trust and Justice. It's a collaborative with U.S. Department of Justice, as well as Yale, John Jay, Center for Policing Equity. There's a certain framework for this because I found specific to our communities of color, where in my community they have the highest crime and also the highest mistrust, which should be no surprise, and the data will show that from East Coast to West Coast. I mean, that's what we're looking at. When I'm making an acknowledgement of the way we used to traditionally police actually did more harm, and we're willing to do policing in a new and different way. And again, acknowledge some of those past harms, that was a breakthrough. Now, some would ask, well, yeah, but the community has a lot of work to do too. They need to work on the no snitching norms. They need to work on all of these other issues, and I agree with that. However, somebody has to take the first step, and I would argue those in a position of power, that's us in law enforcement, have to take that first step. So that was the first really breakthrough we had. The second breakthrough was what I mentioned, which was actually sitting back and listening before responding and doing some follow-up and follow-through. We've been capturing these narratives with some work with some of our academic researchers to maybe inform some of our policies and practices. And so at every meeting we have, somebody's taking notes, not who said what, but what did they say? Here was my experience on a traffic stop. Here was my experience by a homicide detective. They didn't seem to show the empathy that I think they should have. And we've been collecting that so that we can really hear from our whole community after we collect all of these narratives, get into some common themes. And then my community advisory board is looking at those themes as they're extracted, and we're actually examining them against our policies and practices. Can we do some things different? We've already made some changes. For example, it's the way that we follow up with families who have been impacted by violence, specifically homicides. Being more trauma-informed in what we do. That's something that I learned from hearing from our community. So the visualization here is simply to depict that we believe you have to dig into these different layers of listening. One that was fairly unique, and I'll end on this, this might not be for everybody, but we chose to do it in our community, my city manager and I, because of we're hearing some members of the community saying, hey, my voice isn't being heard, and we've got this same group of protesters that's showing up, and they're getting all the news attention and all the speaking time at council meetings. So we actually did what we called a listening tour. We advertised this through our own website and social media, but as through regular media, television, and newspaper as well. And we said simply this: hey, we will sit down and meet with anybody in our community. And it can be anywhere between one person up to 10. And we will come to your church, to your business, even in your living room, and yeah, we did a few of those. Or you can come to our office, wherever it might be, and we'll sit down and give you 30 minutes to an hour, depending on the size of the group. We did that over, trust me, you have to put some parameters on that. You can't do that indefinitely. So we did it over about a 3-month period. We heard from about 150 people through probably maybe about 20, 25 different sessions. And we just had to calendar it out. We had to be very deliberate about carving time out for it, but we were able to get a better picture as to how our community feels about being policed. And so I just wanted to present the 4 layers of listening that we've gone through, but how the law and your community is such a critical part of that, because I think it strikes that perfect balance of absolutely know your rights, but also know your responsibilities. And I think a lot of light bulbs go off on a lot of these kids and participants in the course. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chief Jones. And as you heard, you have to have some intentionality and taking that time really to police differently than we've traditionally policed before, in the sense of building relationships and being relational and taking time. Because again, I go back to our opening speaker of Simon Sinek when he talked about how we make people feel. And these very things that Chief Jones spoke about are really, really going deep into the relational piece and being able to make those impacts on how we make people feel. So with that, Rhonda Glover is going to come forward. She's going to talk about the Explorer project. And for those of you who don't have an Explorer program, I hope that maybe we're planting a seed and that you will reach out and get some more information on that as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Johnny. Good afternoon, everyone. As Johnny mentioned that I work for the FBI. I've been with the FBI for a long, long time, but I'm not going to be speaking on behalf of the FBI right now. I'm going to be speaking on behalf of IECP on some of the good work we're doing with young people. And also I'm going to talk a little bit about Noble and some of the good things that we're doing with young people as well. So just to give you some history, probably back in 2000, maybe like 2007, 2008, Shanetta Cutlar, and she's with DOJ, and myself, we had a conversation about how IECP will converge on a city, and you have like thousands and thousands of law enforcement. They come into the city and then they leave, right? They come into the city, they might buy some stuff, and then they leave. And so we started socializing this a little bit, and we talked about what are some of the things we can do to leave with that city. So we started with a backpack drive. I don't know whether you remember that. We started with a backpack drive I think it was in Denver. Yeah, I think it was in Denver. We did the backpack drive, and then we did a thumb drive, and then we did. Then we started collecting school supplies. We invited the whole membership to participate, and then we shifted. We started to think about, well, what else can we do? And Shanetta and I, we just kind of talked a little bit more about how we could do something differently, and we came up with the Explorers. And we wanted to impact young people that we knew had some sort of connection to law enforcement and had an idea that this is something that they wanted to do. And so what we came up with was connecting young people, explorers, with ICP chiefs. How many of you knew that? Did you know about this program? Some of you chiefs in here, did you know? Because if you didn't, I want you to take all this in, because next year in Orlando, we're going to want you to volunteer. And let me tell you what that looks like. We connect chiefs with explorers on a Sunday morning. They meet up, and then they go and mentor. They'll go to a workshop. They'll go to the exhibit hall. They may sit and chat. But this time is time with that explorer. They're having conversations. They're connecting with chiefs of police and other heads of agencies that they ordinarily would not have that opportunity to do. And so they are having conversations about how they should move forward. Is this something that they should do? What should they major in when they go to college? And then they're talking to that chief about, tell me a little bit about your day. When did you decide you wanted to go into law enforcement? That's what we're doing. We're making that connection. We're giving young people that opportunity to engage with someone that they ordinarily would not have that engagement with. And so just looking at some of the photographs here, this one really resonates with me. Just look at this young lady. She is engaged. She is at a committee meeting with her mentor. And this is what this Sunday looks like when they're going through the exhibit hall, they're connecting with other law enforcement officials, and they're having that opportunity to connect. So for next year in Orlando, I just want to put a pitch in when that call goes out to request some volunteers to participate in the Explorers Project, I want you to raise your hand. And so this is a labor of love for all those who are involved. We are just really jazzed up about what we're doing with our young people. And in conjunction, I just want to be clear, we're also working with the National Law Enforcement Exploring Committee, because this is a partnership. This is a partnership. They are very intentional, and I'm honored to be a part of that committee. They're very intentional about getting young people. This year, we started with 5 explorers in San Diego back in 2012. We had 51 explorers here in Philadelphia. And so, yeah, that's awesome, right? And so, I'm not going to put the number. I have a number in my head, and I've been cautioned not to put the number out there, but we're going to get some more, right? Because you know why? Because we're going to have more chiefs. We're going to have more chiefs participating, and we're going to have more explorers, and then the engagement and the mentoring will converge. So we're just real excited. We're just really jazzed up, and really want you to become involved in the Explorers Project. The next program that I'm going to talk about is Noble Youth. Now, Noble Youth was born out of me being at the Marriott in Washington, D.C. in 2001, and I'm seeing all these kids run around. They're in the lobby running around. And I'm saying to myself, these kids ought to be in workshop. These kids need to be in workshop just like their parents are in workshop. And so in 2002 in Tampa, we had our first Noble Youth Leadership Conference. Now, I want to share with you that this conference also is a labor of love. It is operated and functioned by volunteers, law enforcement volunteers. And when our young people are participating in this conference, we're not pushing law enforcement. We're just showing up, decent and in order, as law enforcement professionals. And so they get to see us as individuals, helping them, answering questions, putting on workshops, and really just sharing who we are. We're not pushing them into law enforcement. Again, we're just showing up as law enforcement, just law enforcement officers that are just real excited to be a part of this program. So far, we've impacted over 2,500 young people in the leadership conferences that we've held. The conferences are free because we recognize that the kids don't have money. Kids don't work. So we're not going to charge them a registration fee. We're going to raise the money. And so I run around and I beg with some of the Noble members and anybody that I can connect with to really invest in this conference and invest in this program. And we're just real excited about all the things that we are doing with young people in Noble overall. And so I know that we are close in time. And so I'm just going to take my seat, and I'm just real open to what kind of questions you have. But before I sit down, I just want to highlight the fact that we have some explorers right here in workshop, just like you, participating, and they've been here since probably since Saturday. You guys have been here, so it's great to see you, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Rhonda, very much. So as she was speaking, there is a lot of work that goes into a lot of this thing we call youth and community engagement. And so it's almost going to be outside of the uniform and outside of the badge that we have to invest that time. And so as you think about your questions that hopefully you will have, one of the ones is, in this traditional style of policing that we've done for so long, where we are data-driven on our metrics, on how we police, how, as police chiefs, do you get your staff out there to embrace this new way of servicing the community versus policing the community? And so if any of you would like to answer that, and then the floor will be open for questions.
Well, the key as far as getting my officers involved, as far as service, having a service mentality, it's got to start from the top. It's got to start with me, and it has to be a culture that's developed within the police department. And you know, a lot of people are stuck in their own way, in their old ways, and you know, once again, it falls back on us as leaders to ensure that the culture within our organizations are such, and we have to lead by example. Chief Talley, who's sitting in the audience here, does such a tremendous job. I mean, talking about engaging the community. He's in our Chicago Noble chapter, and you look up, and he's got three kids with him, and they're interns, and he's taking them, you know, just what we were just talking about, Rhonda was just talking about, taking them around with you. He's taking them to the Noble meeting, he's taking them to other the village board meeting, and they're seeing his day-to-day life, and they get to live what he's living, to learn about those things. And so I know there's some. He's not the only one. You know, what they hear about. You know, we're probably preaching to the choir, but you know what they say: the choir needs to hear the sermon too, right? So, you know, there's some great things going on out there that we're doing to engage, but for me, it has to start with me. It has to be a culture within our department, and I've got to do what I have to do to ensure that it permeates all areas of the department.
That's exactly right. And so, and it can't just be the top, but the top has to show the way. I've been pretty fortunate to have good leadership also at the police union level. So our Stockton Police Officer Association, they do a lot out in the community, because I think it's important for our especially youth to see police officers in uniform talking to them about tough stuff, but also see them outside the uniform. And that can be through arts. We just had an art team that was in a competition with some youth. Definitely sports, right? So we do a lot of baseball, flag football, basketball with the youth, and it's just sports are a great avenue, right, to be able to reach out to the youth. One kind of interesting collaboration that maybe just one example, and it was a partnership between local university, myself, and my police union. And it sprouted up because this thing, have you all heard of a person called Kaepernick and this thing about kneeling? Have you heard about that? Okay, I don't know if you have, but actually when it first occurred, okay, our local college athletes wanted to have a discussion with police. So we felt it was a meaningful way to talk about the issue. So, you know, you mentioned earlier, Chief, you have to be courageous, right, and willing to have these conversations. We did. We had a group of about 8 to 10 police officers, so the union helped get some of the officers there as well for me. And actually, the young adults from high school and college sports teams came up with this idea, kind of a hashtag campaign, but a kind of life in the living the life of the other person. And we had them trade shoes, you know, for a time. So what that meant was, first the officers, they went out and spent a day or more with the youth or young adults. Just what they go through in a day, hanging out with them, going to the practice, going back to their dorm room, whatever it was. And then conversely, a few weeks later, they hung out with a police officer. They went through, you know, the shooting simulator, but they also went out on a ride along with the officers. And so it was in the day in the life of is what it was, so that they got to each experience one another, you know, a day in the life of each other's personal lives. And it's just very beneficial for both. But I was just impressed with our police union and our line level officers that were willing to do that.
Thank you both for that. So that gave time for a little marination. Are there any questions from the audience at all? Yeah, please step up to the mic. Thank you so much.
My question is for Rhonda. Rhonda, it's good to see you again. How are the explorers in the exploring program selected and where are they drawn from?
Well, wherever. Well, wherever the ICP conference is, we connect with the different posts that are, that just like we connected with the Philadelphia Post. We even had some explorers from Nassau County. They showed up. And so that kind of comprised our 51. But we engage with the different posts in the area of where the ICP conference will take place. So that's how we get the kids. We set a number. Okay. So we set a number at 50 this year. Last year we had 25, and so we said, you know what? Let's get 50. So we got 51 this year. And so that's how we get them in. We have, because see, is a funding issue because we have a lunch, because we have to make sure that the kids are taken care of. We got to feed them. So we have a lunch, and so that's where the that might be the block that keeps us from going higher. But I'm hopeful that we can continue to expand.
Well, I have the mic. I just want to give you a shout out. My grandsons went through Noble Youth in Baltimore when we were there 8 years ago or so, and they still talk about it.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Oh, awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes. Any other questions? Okay, so because we have just a few minutes, and so I'm going to allow some final comments here, but also as a reminder for those of you that get the Police Chief magazine, right in the very issue that just came out, it's called Youth Attitudes Regarding Police Effectiveness and Trust in One Mid-Sized City. And it starts on page 16. And I don't know if you look at the articles in here, but this is one of interest that you might find, and might find something else that might make your agency effective, or you might try. So it's another resource that ICP provides. So with that, before I close out, any closing comments that any of the chiefs or panel members would like to toss in there that maybe they collected while others were speaking? No? Mark, you had some.
Dealing with the law in your community, like I say, this is very open. Okay, this program can be done in a church, school, community center, as a part of a youth forum. It can be done in an hour session, 90 minutes, even longer. If anybody is interested in being able to put that on, there's no cost other than you being the requester, supplying the venue where we're going to host it, and announcing it as far as an audience. Okay? We will process contacting the chief, the law enforcement community around there, because we can't have it without them, okay? And then we will go ahead and have someone that is trained to put this on. In addition, if anybody is, we do train the trainer programs all over the country. This is not just for Noble. This is for everyone. If there's a chief out there that's interested in having officers trained in this program, we welcome that. We want to spread this around. We want to keep this engagement going. If you write this down, I appreciate it. If you record it, it's great. It's E. Reynolds, REYNOLDS, at Noble, NOBLENATL.org. It's going to be Earlene Reynolds at the Noble office. That's the person you would contact, and we will move this forward. We have programs going on all the time. We're moving forward with it being placed in different schools. We have a school, California, we have in Chicago Public Schools right now. We're expanding this. And we need to step forward as leaders in this engagement, in this interaction, in this listening concept, with our communities in order to build that trust and legitimacy that we keep talking about. So we really appreciate this opportunity to share with you.
That's wonderful. And I concur on the stepping up in our leadership. So in closing, so with the strategies and resources that have been shared this afternoon, create that collective accountability. I really love that, resonated with me with Simon Sinek, that collective accountability, create safe environments for vulnerability. He also talked about that, and a lot of times it's hard for us as those in uniform to be vulnerable to others. So creating that safe place to do that. Do it with consistency. And I believe one of the panel members mentioned leadership means having the courage to go first, saying, I think we can do better. So with that, I just say thank you for your time, thank you for your attention, and please feel free to come up and ask any of the questions that you have, and have a great, safe travels back. Thank you.